You're watching the 2020 Summit on What Next for Wireless Infrastructure, hosted by the University of Surrey 5G Innovation Centre in association with TelecomTV and supported by IEEE. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV, and we are broadcasting live with our final session of this year's Summit, a live Q&A programme with our presenters. Now, we've already received a lot of questions throughout the day, but if you haven't already done so, now is your chance. Please use the form on the website. Our chair for day 2, Dr. Mike Short, will be our moderator for this session. Mike is Chief Scientific Advisor for the UK Department of International Trade and visiting professor at the University of Surrey. But first, let me introduce our panellists. And we welcome back Bernard Barani, Deputy Head of Unit, DG Connect with the European Commission. Paul Crane, Networks Research Director, Applied Research at BT. David Lister, Senior R&D Manager, Futurist, Vodafone Group. And Dr. Wen Tong, CTO of Wireless, Huawei, and an IEEE Fellow. And with that, I'll hand it across to Mike.
Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you on European time, it's great that you can join us. And we've had 10 fabulous speakers today. I'm very pleased we've got a selection of those who are joining us on this particular panel. Hopefully all the answers we can offer you help to respond to some of the questions you've submitted. But let me just start off with one particular one for Bernard Barani and Tong Wen. How important are global standards in the evolution of 5G and indeed 6G? Can you give me clear reasons why global standards are the right way forward rather than regional standards? Bernard?
Well, I can start on that one by stating first that from the perspective of 5G developments already, the standardization process started sometimes in 2015 in September when 3GPP kind of kicked off a kind of inception workshop in Phoenix in Arizona. And since these early days, from a European Commission perspective, we have always been very supportive to single global standards for very simple reasons. First of all, we believe that the technology is increasingly complicated, and ensuring interoperability across different systems is going to be more and more complicated, and this is one of the issues that potentially affect the consumer perspective. So, of course, in our policy background in the Commission, the consumer is always very much at the center. And the second aspect, which is in our view fundamental, is that we believe that global standards enable economies of scales and economies of scope, which at the end of the day is beneficial for the industry when they have to develop cost-efficient products, which again have an impact on the cost, which is further invoiced to the customer.
Thank you. Tom?
Yes, so on the similar line as Bernard was saying, there are 3 very important reason for 5G and therefore, of course, is 6G for a global standardization. Number 1 is the technology complexity and the technology, the advance of the technology. For example, the phone in your chip has 6 billion of a transistor now. That's the integration we need to see in order to make this happen. That is a very, very advanced, intensive technology investment. Any regional and even single company will have probably not impossible, but it's a big challenge to get there. So the technology has the global ecosystem for the technology will be the critical to make a technology viable and commercializable. So second one is the 5G or 6G itself is because the economic scale, and it's because the successful of a 2G, 3G, 4G. All the lesson we learned that is from the economic scale wise. The third one is a 5G and 6G now is started distinct from the previous generation. They become a platform. Then it's a platform for innovation, and for everybody anywhere can do that innovation. If it is a fragmented, your business or your regional talent, that impact is very limited. That's one of the reason global standards will enable this thing.
That's great. Paul Crane then with a supplementary question. What new players need to come into standardization to help us move forward with 5G and 6G? For example, very few have mentioned today the role of the internet players. I know you earlier on talked about, do we need another G? But would you care to comment on who are the other players who may help us en route towards standardization?
Yeah, I can. Just before I do that, just to add to the other answers. Of course, in the mobile world, it wasn't that long ago that we had regional standards. 2G and 3G were effectively all regional, different standards in America, Europe, and Japan, South Korea. And the major success of the industry, I think, was coming together with LTE, common global standard. And I think it'd be a real retrograde step going back to the regional standards for all the reasons that have been given by the other two panelists. I think there are two aspects to who else needs to get involved in the standardization. I think the key thing at the moment is that the way that we're going around building networks is dramatically changing with softwareization. And one of the methods of getting more innovation and agility into the supply chain is open architectures. And I think it's those bodies that are taking 3GPP standards and either profiling them or generating new interface specs where 3GPP doesn't play to enable componentization of telecoms infrastructure. And Open RAN is the poster child of this activity at the moment. That then will allow other players into the supply chain, either supplying to the big vendors or new industry generating in its own right. That's where I think that the key thing for other players to come in, and of course there's a real need for closer working between maybe the IEEE and 3GPP to make sure that moving on from where we are now, we end up with a complete holistic communication solution.
Is your point, Paul, the IEEE to bring together the Wi-Fi and the cellular roadmaps, or is it a different point with the IEEE?
So Wi-Fi, cellular, and potentially internet as well. Yeah. So on the Wi-Fi side, I mean we've always seen 5G and beyond as being effectively a het net of technologies, and cellular and Wi-Fi working together to each supporting the use cases that they're appropriate for, but integrated and converged, and that's BT's strategy.
And there perhaps needs to be more convergence. Can I move to David Lister? David, some of the areas referred to today have touched on spectrum. Do you see some of the spectrum policies needing change as we integrate more of the Wi-Fi, cellular and satellite options together? And if so, how would we go about that en route towards 5G evolution as well as 6G?
So I think to start with, you could ask if that is the right question, because there's an assumption there in the question that 6G in itself is based on a change to the radio access layer. Now, it might be that as we go forward into 6G, we're talking about a set of services or applications that run on top of the existing connectivity layer provided by 4G and 5G. In terms of does the regulatory or the environment need to change and how spectrum is made available? Well, I think in the low and the mid-band spectrum bands, it's unlikely there's going to be very much expansion of spectrum. The spectrum resources are already occupied. But where I think we can expect to see more innovation and more creative thinking in how spectrum is used in the future is maybe in the shared bands or the unlicensed bands. And there's suggestions that maybe we can use artificial intelligence type of algorithms to try to identify when bands are underutilized and can be repurposed for other purposes. So possibly going forwards, we might be able to use shared access bands in a more efficient way than what is happening at the moment, where the technology itself has to sort of work out how to use the band without causing interference. So I think that the premise of the question determines what the answer is. It depends if 6G actually requires a new radio in many ways, and if it doesn't, then I don't think the spectrum regulatory environment fundamentally needs to change.
I agree that you've taken it from my premise, which is the right thing to do. But when we think about better coverage, it seems to be a much more multi-mode world. And maybe I'm assuming that some of those will be fixed with 5G rather than with 6G. But I really wondered if any spectrum changes are needed. Perhaps I could go to Bernard Barani to say, does he think we need any changes to spectrum policy, or are we working adequately as it is?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer, but what we can see from a Commission perspective, and you know that on this particular issue, we work with the so-called Radio Spectrum Policy Group, which is a set of high-level representatives of member states. We can see various toolbox which are available to member states to deploy their spectrum already in 5G now, with different licensing methodology, whether you apply the traditional, let's say the most popular band at 5G for the moment, which is the C band, the 3.5, 3.4, 3.8 gigahertz, or whether you move into higher spectrum, which is much more localized and for which let's say the licensing mechanism can be made much more regional, local, or campus-like type of licensing, which, of course, is not necessarily the type of big auction process that we can see for, let's say, the traditional bands for macro cells. So at this moment in time, we can see that there is certainly an evolution from the perspective of the use case and the spectrum chunks which are being applied. For instance, in Germany, they also earmarked this 100 megahertz for vertical usages, which are kind of licensed a different way compared to the way the spectrum is licensed to operators. But also under this understanding that the spectrum is much more localized and very regional, or again localized type of use. So this type of different tools, I think at the end of the day, there is a toolbox which is available to the regulators, and it's up to the regulators to use the toolbox to the best interest of the public policies.
Yes, I went straight onto spectrum after global standards, because clearly if spectrum on a global level is not harmonized, it would seem to work against economies of scale. Tong, would you wish to comment on the spectrum options going forward, or are you happy to leave that for my next question?
Very quick, Mike. Yes, the spectrum is a resource to increase capacity and improve the coverage. That's that is the very primary resource to do that. But in terms of a spectrum regime of licensed and unlicensed auction and all kinds of different options, as long as they are not, become a roadblock for the commercial success, I think there's a way to modernize the spectrum allocation method as well.
I think we need to avoid roadblocks, certainly. Tong, while you have the line, can I just ask a few questions about energy? How are you seeing, from a manufacturing point of view, big energy breakthroughs? Are you seeing some at the base station level with better use of artificial intelligence? How would you describe the main breakthroughs to reduce energy in mobile networks going forward?
Yeah, so reduce the energy it has to be a holistic approach. It's not only the power supply or components level will do. First of all, the network was not designed energy efficient. Even it is the packet centric network now, it's still not very in terms of protocol architecture, not energy efficient. It's not able to even to shut down the network when it doesn't momentarily need any connectivity. That's not it's have to be always power on, not always connected. So this is one problem that I think need to bring awareness that to modern put advanced technology in the next generation architecture consideration. Second is the computing platform. The demand and the Moore's law to reduce energy is not matching. We start to see the diverging now. As well, the struggle or dilemma we have is a software, a pure software solution or energy optimized solution. These two things are not harmonized that I can see. And we definitely need a cross-industry will, and as well the cohesive action to do this. Otherwise, it will remain the problem down the road.
I agree. Can I go to Paul and David? David, both of you are actively involved with different types of networks, but how important is energy cost reduction and energy efficiency in your networks? Maybe starting with you, Paul, because you've clearly got the opportunity to look at fixed and mobile networks. Could you comment on that, please, Paul?
Yeah, well, I mean, we use a significant percentage of the UK's energy production running, our fixed network, particularly our PSTN network and the mobile. So not only is there a growing issue of the amount of energy used, but actually getting the power to sites is an increasing problem as well. So I think sustainability and particularly energy usage throughout the whole network will become an increasing issue and increasing priority in the purchase decision of us as well. And I think there is, it's a major research work. And I think one of those areas of research where it's, interdomain. It's not just the telecoms research area. It's, software, IT, material science, etc. And I think there is a real need for a, significant effort for future telecoms, looking at how we optimize and reduce energy usage within the networks.
That's good to hear. David?
Yeah, and it's the same here in Vodafone. Energy is so important for different reasons, both for the cost to us as an operator, which is increasingly significant as part of our operating costs. So we want to reduce our energy consumption, but equally, and maybe more importantly, because we want to strive towards a point where we are reducing our environmental footprint and moving towards net zero carbon. So there's two essential drivers there. So when it comes to product selection and vendor selection, energy consumption of products is always something that we measure our suppliers on. So we can help to drive energy optimization and reduction just by choosing suppliers which are more efficient in terms of the power consumption. I think going forwards as well, it's about, for us, dimensioning our network to make sure that we are dimensioned the right network elements to the right capacity at the right time. And the more that we can switch off elements when they're not necessary, then the more efficient we can run the network and the less energy we can consume. And moving forwards, I think there's more opportunity to do that with different software features and artificial intelligence coming in.
That's great. I guess both operators, you would normally expect to be part of the solution for your customers as well in this area, helping to reduce their energy bills as well as your own. Can I go back to Bernard to touch on some of the things he said this morning with regard to future research? You touched on some new technology areas that aren't typically associated automatically with telecoms. You touched on AI, you touched on blockchain, you touched on quantum. How big a role do you think these new technologies are going to have? And how will the European Commission support those? And then I'll move on to Ton after that with a similar question. Bernard?
Well, again, this is all developing work at this moment in time. So I suppose everyone at this moment in time is looking into the same type of technologies which are potentially driving a future technology roadmap for 6G. So terahertz communication and sensing is something which has been quite a lot mentioned in quite a few presentations, and that's clearly on the roadmap that we are working with industry at this moment in time. So it's not the communication part of the terahertz, but it's also the sensing part of the terahertz, which allows to have kind of immersive or real-time information from the surrounding environments, be it physical environment or even biological type of environment. So all this data, as was said in other presentations, will probably need machine learning to be optimally used. And from machine learning type of capabilities, the way we can see the researchers looking into the issue at this moment in time is twofold, either from the perspective of optimizing the network characteristics itself, such as providing the right spectrum and the right bands or the right capacity at the right time and the right place, or as was also exemplified I think in one speech this morning as well, on having intelligent surfaces to minimize EMF. So there are a lot of potentialities of machine learning to be used from the perspective of optimizing the network itself. But there is also, from our understanding, perspective of integrating machine learning in the network to serve user applications. So at the service of the applications which are running on top of the network to make them more agile or more efficient. And these are all avenues which are being looked at this moment in time. Of course, as was mentioned by other panelists and other speakers, within this overall perspective, the phenomenon of disaggregation, Open RAN, and softwareization is also bringing a new set of IT-type technologies where you could imagine of having open functionalities in the RAN, which are precisely governed through machine learning type of processes. So it opens a lot of innovation capabilities at the level of the RAN as well. Other type of technologies we are looking into at this moment in time also are these intelligent surfaces, which were mentioned, which potentially have an impact on how spectrum is going to be used or spectrum is going to be optimized in terms of usage. So there are a large number of technologies. I don't think we have time to go into all of them, but it's a very vibrant research domain at this moment in time. That's what we probably can conclude on.
And you are providing a smart networks and services platform to encourage all of those that seem to be logical candidates, I think. Ton, from a global vendors and manufacturers point of view, you emphasized a lot of the AI areas of new technology as well as sensing. Are you more emphasis on AI than other technologies going forward?
Yes. So to get back to your question, yes. From our point of view, for example, in the past history, I was saying that for several times now. So for when we have the internet emerge as a dominant application, so GSM is a very best mobile technology that optimized for voice. But then make internet successful, we have the LTE. That's where if down the road, the AI will be the major service emerging as a pervasive and everywhere for everybody, then we really need to think new generation technology just to optimize that AI. At the moment, over the top to run AI on the current or previous generation, there is a significant inefficiency on that. So that's the one of the driver or I will see the major driver. That's the AI. How to optimize for the AI in the service in coming in the next couple of 10 years. In order to do that, by the way, when we upgrade the generation, there's a time round with even the existing millimeter wave spectrum. That is opportunity to get in additional advantage for sensing. This will be the new capability for the carrier as well, because all the application and service can benefit from the sensing, especially when you have data from the carrier for the local territory, or and then you have blended with the AI application. So these are the probably the major differentiation when we talk about the 6G.
That's very interesting. Ton, also from your international point of view, do you see some markets moving faster than others? And if so, which ones would you single out as being the leaders in the mobile space? Clearly, you're based in Canada today, but can you give us a global view of the leaders and the movers and shakers?
In terms of adoption of technology, at the moment, the South Korea and China move very fast on the 5G, and in the application side, Korean is the in the 5G wise, they are ahead. Of course, in terms of market size and the ability, to eventually move the entire global, saying that the US and China and the entire single Europe, in terms of single platform, these are the three determination force for the final 5G success.
Thanks for the summary. Going back to Paul and David, are there some areas where we need to step up in the UK, or dare I say it, in Europe, in AI or software? Are there some recommendations that we need to do things to actually make sure that we are competitive with those global leaders?
Well, I'd like to think that we are competitive, to be honest. I'm not too sure that we're getting left behind. Certainly, I can only speak from what we're doing ourselves. We are very active. We've got a large research group and a large technology group, very much focused on softwarization and AI. And we already use AI, not just in our network, but actually even in things like customer services. And as I think, the concept of AI, it can be applied almost everywhere in different ways, but it requires very bespoke problem solving to be useful. So it could be used, for example, in the way that we choose which network elements to operate and which ones to switch on and switch off. Going forward, it could be used in the radio access layer to improve how we use features such as massive MIMO, the advanced antenna arrays. And it's a journey as we introduce AI capabilities into different elements in the network. So I can only speak for ourselves. I don't know if we're being left behind or not, but it's certainly an area which, as a company and as an international group, we're putting a lot of resources into this activity, and we'll see AI being introduced further into a network for different purposes.
Paul, what's your...
Yeah, so I'll answer the question in two dimensions. The first one is, it's been great to see in the UK government investing in 5G, particularly the 5G test beds and trials program, which has been really about stimulating UK end users of 5G services. So Industry 4.0, automation, agri-tech, etc. It's been great to see that program and the results of that being so successful. And I think there's still a need for that and an ongoing program of work to help stimulate, if you like, the end users using taking advantage of the infrastructure that's being put in. The other thing is that the investment that is made in the UK in academic research in telecoms and the related space. And I think there is now a need, I think, to invest in the translational research. How do you take the great academic work that's being done and make sure that that's embedded into industry, that knowledge and skills is used for the benefit of the economy. And I think that's one area where there's a need. There are great examples of where that's happening. If you look at for example, the quantum hubs in the UK, our engagement in some of those quantum technologies that were referred to before. So QKD, securing the future connectivity using laws of physics rather than maths, and then quantum sensing, and quantum clocks. Quantum clocks particularly. If we have very cheap, very, very accurate timing throughout a network, you could start thinking about network in a completely different way. Cellular architectures, for example, and so I'm just using that as an example of there's some great technology being developed, and it's that translation into real applications where I think a focus and stimulus and maybe government intervention would be really welcome.
That's good to hear from both of you. While we've got you, Paul, just if you are trying to inspire young people, maybe young graduates or young people generally, if you're trying to inspire them to join the mobile industry, what would you be saying to inspire them going forward?
So we've actually been really successful over the last couple of years in recruiting into BT at apprentices, graduate apprentices, higher level apprentices, graduates, PhDs, and the key thing is. It's actually quite an inspirational area to work in, because what we're doing is we're building the infrastructure which is going to underpin the future economy, the future society and economy, and much more than telecoms has been in the past. It is becoming that national critical infrastructure, and is effectively there to do good. And so, the ambition is quite inspiring. And of course, careers in the industry are fantastic. The technology, the innovation, the creativity. And I think with, going forward from where we are now for the next 10 years, there's going to have to be, research development, which is, if you like, cross-domain. So the integration of the liberal arts with with technology to actually create those solutions that are gonna make a big difference, and I think that's really inspiring.
I think you're defining a digital economy there, Paul, which is great to hear in terms of the inspiration. Bernard, from a European Commission point of view, clearly the skills are a key resource for this industry. Does the European Commission have an angle on skills and development and training that goes beyond the pure research programs?
Well, we have some, yes, of course, we are supporting development of curricula in universities as kind of spin-off activities from the research that we are sponsoring. And this is something that we do through elements or through initiatives called digital innovation hubs, where we put the technology in practice, and out of this practice we try to develop, or we try to stimulate academias to develop new curricula. I think this is something also that they do in the 6G flagship initiative of Finland in Oulu. They are very much also having this skills perspective in mind. But in my view, the skills are absolutely needed from the perspective of their wide their widths, because it's a huge number of skills. I mean, when we talk about machine learning, we talk about mathematics, where there are a lot of problems which are in the domains of physics, or even chemistry, or even there are all sorts of domains which are potentially impacted by the technology we are talking about, software design or whatever. So it's a very huge and wide. I think one of the problems we may have in some countries in Europe is that when you need to get the best mathematicians to work on it, for instance, they prefer to go to finance, because it's much more rewarding to work on financial models for the city in UK, for instance, than to work as a telecom engineer on machine learning, I suppose. And that's something we see in many countries. There we have this kind of competition of skills. And this is where it's not that easy always to keep the people at the right place.
I think there'll always be competition for talent, but we need to sell our story well to attract some talent. Guy, do you intervene with some of the questions we're receiving?
Yes, thank you, Mike. We've been getting quite a lot of questions in the last 10 minutes, and I think we've probably got about enough time to get through a couple of them. There's a question just in here. It strikes to the heart of the infrastructure theme. In 6G, will NFV be adopted everywhere? Will all telecom services be provided by software functions and standard services and white boxes, etc., without any expensive, dedicated, traditional telecom equipment?
Do I have a go at answering that?
Please, Paul, try.
So I'll try. So I think absolutely. I think if you project 10 years forward, then you can definitely regard a network as a set of distributed compute resource that's running network functionality and application functionality. Now, I think there's always going to be a need for dedicated telecoms equipment at the connectivity layer, optics for example. So the direction of travel is softwareization in the core network, and as far as we possibly can, softwareization out into the access network, out into the RAN. But as another example, certainly at the edge of that, the edge of the radio access network, you're going to need the dedicated electronics and electrical equipment to turn your digital into the analog and transmit. So what I envisage is a flexible, agile, software-based infrastructure. Where most of the functionality is software-based rather than traditional appliance-based. That is, because we've got that infrastructure, is automated and drives the most effective services that we can.
That's great. Do you have another question there, Guy?
Yes, I do. I think we can squeeze in another question here. Well, this question really is from someone with as probably a longer memory as you and I, and it shows how long we've been working on all this. The question is, the EU UMTS task force presented its report and vision diagram way back in 1994. Yet here we are some 25 years later, and we still don't have the proposed seamless communications in terms of coverage, capacity and quality. What confidence do the panelists have that 6G will prove any more effective for the end users?
I think I know who wrote that, but Bernard, would you like to go first with the confidence level?
Yeah, the UMTS task force of Bosco Fernandez. Yes, I remember that quite well. Talking in those days of the ABC, the always best connected, with the seamless communications through various communication nodes or type of cells. I mean, this vision is more or less coming through, and I think that's the role of a vision, to steer the research and to channel the energies into a certain domain. Does not necessarily mean that at the end of the day the result will be exactly what you have put in your vision at the beginning of the story. I give you a very simple example. I started to work in this domain in the RAISE program in 1995. In those days, the vision was fiber to the home in 95. Fiber to the home in 95. We are in 2020. I don't have fiber at my home because the VDSL guys have been so smart and the operators have been so good at maintaining the copper pair that they have found alternatives to the vision that was there. But the drive was broadband capacity for everyone, and this has materialized, but another way. So the vision is something we start from. Whether it materializes at the end of the day is always depends on market forces, which are not always completely predictable, and technological evolutions and market forces, which are not always predictable. But they are very useful to channel energies in one given direction. For instance, again, Ray's vision was STM technology, 155 megabit per second at home over fiber for high definition television at 155 megabit per second. We are far below that at this moment in time. So you see, there are a number of things that cannot predict.
We need to keep fighting for these objectives. Shall I just do a wrap-up question, Guy? Is the time?
Absolutely, mate. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, so Christmas is coming. We all know that. We're not going to change the date. But if I was Santa Claus and was to give you one wish that you could apply to changing the industry in the next 10 years, how would you apply that wish this Christmas to make the land we all live in so much better by 2030? What would be your wish that I'm granting you now be put on? Would you like to go first, David?
Being put on the spot there. Not talking about a personal wish here. I assume a wish as an operator wanting to deploy a future service. I mean, one of the big challenges for us is always to do a cost reduction. And if we could have a wish, it would be to find a way in which future sites cost absolutely nothing to deploy and operate. But we can still deliver a great service.
Spot, David.
There you go.
A good answer on the spot. Paul?
Yeah, so I think my wish for this Christmas was that we do set off 6G research in the right direction, and because I think we're at that stage now where we need to focus, and my premise is that we need to realise that 6G isn't going to be deployed into a greenfield site. It will be within a existing operational environment. That operators will be operating 4G, 5G, maybe even 2G when 6G comes along. And we not only is it technology, pure technology development, but the development needs to be how do we ensure that equipment is actually being able to be deployed at the right time in an agile manner that meets market demand. And so, and I think what the non-backwardly compatible solutions between 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. Don't think that's a tenable way of deploying stuff in the future. And so my wish would be that the research development not only looks at the individual technologies, but looks at how we actually deploy them.
Very good. Don, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so the wish is that next 10 years in this technology will be successful. In addition to that, I think on the humanity side, we will have a much brighter future. The globalization will be prevail, with a less geopolitical, the influence.
Thank you. And Bernard, to complete.
Yeah, on our side, I think we would have two wishes. One immediate wish is that we manage to get the 1 billion euro that we are trying to to get for the partnership that we want to set up with industry. So that's not yet fully settled at this moment in time, even though we have good hopes. Now, from the more industrial perspective, I think what we would certainly like to see from a European Commission perspective is the real success of this vertical story that is a journey that we have initiated with 5G that will probably be extended in the 6G domain, and which is very important for Europe to ensure, let's say, a take-up of digital in key vertical sectors. So that's something that we hope will really materialize.
That's great, Bernard. And going back to you, Guy, I hope I can grant all 5 wishes that have been asked for by our 4 presenters. And thank you for all the panelists who've been so excellent and clear today. I'm sure we've heard an awful lot from our 20 speakers over the last 2 days that should inspire us for some time to come. Thank you for all that you've done, Telecom TV, to put on today's event with the help of ETSI and 5G Innovation Centre.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yes, and a great discussion. And you've got me thinking now about my Christmas wish. Thank you to all our guests. That is all we have from this year's summit on what next for wireless infrastructure. A reminder that all the sessions over the past 2 days will be made available to view on demand. And on behalf of the Telecom TV team, thank you all for watching, and to our presenters and guests for participating. Our thanks to Professor Rahim Tafazoli, Head of ICS 5GIC at the University of Surrey, for bringing this event together and being our host, and to our colleagues at ETSI for their support. Personally, I can't wait to see how the advances in wireless infrastructure make their way into 5G networks and beyond, and shape the direction and scope of 6G. As usual, we'll be following developments very, very closely. Stay safe, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.